Hello, my name is Matt. Welcome to Unbearable 73. As you can see, this will be a full spoiler review for Stranger Things Season 1, Episode 3. Again, full spoiler review. I will continue to do full spoiler reviews until I catch up, hopefully when the second half of the fourth season is released. We'll see how it goes. In the prior episode review, I commented on the dingy lighting effects that the directors used, and I was ambivalent about them. This is the first episode the Duffer Brothers didn't direct. Sean Levy directed this one. Either he did something different with the dingy lighting effect, or my perception of what they were actually doing was incorrect. Now, I noticed, particularly in this episode, but as my memory tells me that was common to the first two. Well, it occurred in the first two, and may have been what I've been misinterpreting as the dingy lighting effect. Basically, if you watch in the background, you pay particular attention, like when they show, let's say the character in the room, there's a window, and the light from the outside, whether it's day or night, or how sunny or whatever, cloudy, or if the moon's out or not, like. They'll have that in the scenes, so in theory, in a regular show, if it was bright and sunny, you might think, well, it's occurring sometime in midday and there's no clouds or whatever, right? Or if it was night and there was no light at all, you might think it occurred in the dark of the moon time. Well, I've noticed that they have deliberately seemed to be murking up what the outside lighting effect is, and I think that's on purpose as a background detail to try to add to the creepiness of what's going on, due to the unsurety, if that's still a word. I think it is. Meaning, it's early in the show. We've seen a bunch of events. We have some concepts floating around, but we don't really know what's going on. So they're trying to emphasize that through making us unsure of our visual experience with some background details. And that's one I think I've caught up on it as a technique that at least Sean Levy did. And maybe the Dust Brothers were doing it, and I called it the dingy lighting effect, which is something, which I eventually will find something that has it, and I'll show you that in a separate issue. But I think they may have been doing the same thing that Sean Levy did in this episode. I liked it, by the way. And it's not dishonest storytelling. Some people will say it is. You do have to fool. You don't want to lie to your audience, but you do have to help them create the ability to suspend their disbelief. Okay, if you can't suspend your disbelief, even for a pure historical show, because they could do a history documentary about, say, the War of 1812, and be exact on the details, but it's still a fictionalization in the sense that it's not you watching a camera to the actual War of 1812. You're watching either recreate events or a timeline of events. You're not seeing the actual events, and you're not remembering them if you were there to witness them, which obviously it's the War of 1812. No one live would do that. So it's still a sort of abstraction, if you don't like the word fictionalization of it, of the events. And you do have to suspend your ability, to even for that, say, okay, it's not the actual War of 1812, it's this show or movies display or interpretation of historical events that occurred for a real historical documentary, and you have to do that because the War of 1812. Sorry, my allergies are driving me crazy today. I woke up first day back from my vacation, and it was as if someone had dumped a gallon of pollen on me while I was sleeping. They've just been going crazy. But anyway. So you have to suspend the actual War of 1812 had so many details and so many events and so many people involved. You can never get 100% exact simulation of it in terms of visual experience. So that's why you still would have to suspend your sense of disbelief, because there are events that must have occurred that you're never going to see in a documentary. Likewise, in a show like this, that they more so that the director's number one job really isn't to make a cohesive storyline that's like a sort of a 1B type of level, not 1A, but it's to help. But everything is geared towards helping you suspend your sense of disbelief, so you can immerse yourself in the show or book, if it was a book or whatever. But particularly for a show, to immerse yourself in it, so you're not constantly thinking, well, this isn't real, and then your interest wanders and you lose the story, and pretty soon you're playing a video game with the TV on in the background. So anyway, move on to the direction itself. That show don't tell quality that I noticed from the Duffer Brothers was not something that Levy seemed to use as much as they did. There was some more exposition scenes in this where the characters talked about what they were doing and you could read some news clips and things like that as Hopper was investigating the Hawkins laboratory. Now Levy did seem to use a lot of what it's called hanging character dialogue, where a character might issue a thought like, here's a famous scene that Doctor Who fans talk about from the Third Doctor, where now the Doctor, his age, even though some will say, well, it's 900 years old, it's this years old, whatever, his age is very ambiguous because of the time travel issues. So the Third Doctor famously once said in a scene where he was being challenged as a scientist, and this human who's like 50 years old, and so he says to him, he goes, a scientist? I've been a scientist for thousands of... And then he cuts off. And thousands of what, you might say? Well, we all finished that thought in our head. Years. Which the Doctor was about to... But the Doctor stopped because he would have sounded like a kook, because he's trying to, the presence of aliens on the Earth was not something that was widely known to the public and whatever. So that type of thing, Levy seemed to use a lot, where character would say something and really wouldn't quite finish what they were saying, but in your mind as an audience, you would finish it from the context and from viewing the actors acting with their facial expressions, like what would have been. And that can be a bad tactic, but so far I think, as well as this show has done, I think it's a good tactic, in the sense that they can let you fill in a story without necessarily committing to particular details. So if they do have to change something in the future, or are planning to do a sort of, subversion type of thing, which I'll talk about down below, they can say, we never actually said that, like, the Doctor was thousands of years old. We just had him say something that he could have, the Doctor could have said, I've been a scientist for thousands of months. And it sounds goofy or whatever. But the point I'm getting at is, it allows them to commit to something without fully committing to it, so to speak. Now, the dark side of this tactic is the path of the show Lost, or if you remember early 2000 Battlestar Galactica reimagining, where they just keep doing this and never explain anything. And the audience winds up more frustrated at the end, despite the quality of the product, than anything else. Now let's just do the plot review here. There are a lot of plot lines that wound their way through this episode, okay? The plot lines I enjoyed the most were that for Sheriff Hopper and for Joyce Byer. Sheriff Hopper has become the driving force on this show. Not only with how the character is portrayed in the story, but how he's written and how the actor is... how the character is written in the story, let me clarify here, and how the actor is portraying him in the story. Meaning, you can have all the great writing in the world, but if the actor just sort of mails it in, you get meh. On the other hand, you can have the greatest acting performance in the universe, but if the writing is horrible, you get meh. Here's a perfect confluence of events. Now, I think, because I had mentioned very early on, I was concerned about the vices and the level of vices that they showed for Sheriff Hopper at the beginning. But I think they might be using his vices more as a little bit of humorous elements, because they did that in last episode and this episode. In other words, there was a scene in here at the library where it's a very dark moment. They just came from the Hawkins laboratory. They've been lied to. The sheriff and the chief of police know that. The sheriff says it to him directly. They've been investigating this missing kid and a murder, all in this order. So it's very dark. The show is getting darker. So they go to the library, and the librarian is there, and our first comment is basically sort of a kind of snarky but done well thing about how Sheriff Hopper never called her back after their date, and they get a little bit of humorous exchange where Hopper's like, well, maybe, I'll call you back for a date next week, and then And it was done well, just the right amount of humor. Taika Waititi, you should pay attention to that when you do films. By the way, that you should have just the right amount of film humor, not like what you did in Thor Ragnarok, which turned a movie that could have been a solid 10 into like a 6. But anyway, just the right amount of humor to sort of stop the complete dive down into the darkness, let it level out a bit in the humor, and give me a little uptick, and then go back to the darkest, but on a more gentle slope, so to speak. If you want to track the rate of how dark the plot is. And again, later in the episode, it gets very dark again when we basically pull a body out of the lake, and I'll kind of get to that in a minute. Sheriff Hopper's pretty much become my favorite character on the show. Now let's talk about Joyce Byer, the other plot I really loved in this particular episode. So Winona Ryder, for those who don't know her, she's been in a lot of stuff over the years, and she tends to play the characters she does the best with are characters with emotional issues. Okay, whether it's just depression or anxiety or whatever. If you remember the movie, I think it was Heathers. Yeah, Heathers. The character she played in there, or whether, regardless of the movie, the point I'm getting at is she tends to do best when she plays characters who have sort of mental health issues. And Joyce Byers is basically going batshit crazy because of her missing son, obviously. And she's being portrayed, she descends into madness, particularly in this episode, while at the same time, even during, all of a sudden the lights around her home start to indicate some sort of communication is going on. So the fact that her manic behavior, once she realized that something or someone was communicating with her by manipulating electricity, reached a result in the episode was nice. In other words, they didn't just use the mania and have it pay. There was a payoff within the episode. Okay, and as she kept putting up more and more Christmas lights and tried to find the best spots to communicate, I kept wanting to see her storyline progress more and more over almost anything other than Sheriff Hopper's storyline. Now, my suspicious nature kept telling me that might not be Will communicating. Now, of course, we don't know yet either way because we need more episodes. But this is had horror themes on it, so you can't always, as an audience member, you can't always assume, that the communication you think is from a good guy is from a good guy. And when the creature ripped out of the wall and went after her, it was probably my favorite moment in the series so far in terms of payoff at the very least. It's an example of this. Now this is an example of subverting audience expectations that actually works and is done properly. We were all expecting her to do that. That we saw heartwarming moments where she thought she was communicating with Will and whatever, and maybe she probably is communicating with Will, from my understanding of future events. But then this creature comes out and whoa, this is totally. You expecting Will to be somehow to reveal his location or whatever, or possibly even be saved in this, but no. Saved by the mother's love and dedication or whatever, but no, creature comes out of the wall, and we saw something come out of the wall with the little girl in an episode, which kind of cut away fast, and I chose not to go back and slow down the scene to see the exact shape, only because I felt that it cut away fast on purpose, and I didn't want to lose my perception of the whole episode. Now, probably afterward, I'll just go back and glance at it and maybe talk if it's relevant, because I'm talking about the effects of the emergence from the wall with the stretchy effect, because we've seen that in stuff before. Okay. So let's move on here. Now, Barb's storyline is another interesting one to me, and obviously it takes a very tragic turn in the beginning of the episode. Now, a seemingly tragic turn, I should say, and I say seemingly because I follow the rule of they ain't dead until you see the bodies on the screen and the series is canceled. Okay? So the juxtaposition between Nancy and Steve getting it on while Barbara's basically screaming for help while this thing rips her apart it's really powerful. And it's also particularly ironic because Barb went there to protect Nancy, and she didn't. Nancy is ignoring Barb, who needs protection. Not ignoring her, distracted or whatever. In a sign that writers care about every storyline. I think the fact that Barb went to the party to protect her and then disappeared, it weighs on Nancy, and you see it growing throughout this episode. I see it's more and more frantic about Barb's disappearance. To a smaller scale, if you go back and if you would edit all of those scenes that didn't have didn't have Nancy or Joyce in it, Nancy is going to a smaller scale escalation that Joyce did. I think they timed that on purpose. You have a Joyce really manic, and then somewhere between Joyce's next manic scene, you have Nancy growing, but not into the manicness, but not quite as much. Like a sort of, there's a lot of like layered, almost sleight of hand that they do to really get you into it and to control the pacing on this, which I really like. I'm not enough of an expert on film construction to really break it down that way, though. I'm sure there are way more advanced reviews on this that will do that. But if you find it interesting, I would suggest looking for that sort of stuff. Yeah. And the continued pile of lies that Nancy does to sort of cover for her, getting on with our boyfriend and Barb secretly going with her as well. They did the classic, well, Barb telling Barb's mom, Barb's sleeping at Nancy's house, telling Nancy, and so forth. And it really pays off when Nancy pretty much realizes that Barb is missing and or dead, and she runs to her mom, who had reached earlier in her in episodes, to sort of say, you can talk about anything. So, what I think the mom was really thinking is going to be talking about that's our teenage daughter having sex. Yeah. There's a lot more that happens in this episode, and I could probably go on for hours. We're talking about how much stuff is in here. I really don't want to make this one, but I don't want to, so I want to focus on one more thing, okay? My impression of Millie Bobby Brown continues to grow. As I mentioned, I had watched the first season of this years ago, and for reasons it didn't really stick. I kind of liked it, but it didn't stick to me. So my real impressions of Millie Bobby Brown come from Godzilla King of the Monsters and Godzilla vs. Kong. Okay, and I did not like her. I had a very bad impression of her as an actress, and now I'm realizing it's more that she was playing the role she was given, so to speak. That the writing for the human characters, which we've commented before. I mean, I didn't review them because I was on YouTube then, but talking about them, the people who do the legendary MonsterVerse just don't understand that we don't care about the humans. We care about the kaiju. They're the stars. Human and kaiju movies work best when the human character storylines are subsets of the monster storylines, and they continue to foist off all these human characters in those films. And not only that, but they're writing. It's also some bad writing for those characters. So Millie Bobby Brown, when I watched her on those two films, she was what we call a Kenny in Godzilla versus in Godzilla King of the Monsters when she was a young kid, and she was like whatever the teenage version of Kenny is in Godzilla vs. Kong. And I disliked her as an actress, not as a person, obviously, just as an actress. But on the other hand, I'm really now beginning to get impressed by her work here. And it's very difficult work, and she's like 12 or something and 13 in this as an actress, and she has a very non-verbal role, so she has to convey a metric crap ton of information by her body posture, her facial expressions, how she angles her head, the timing of the few words she does use, and she's shown she's a great young actress, and I'm really getting impressed. And I tend to think of an actor by their first character I really liked. Like, we all think of Arnold as the Terminator because that was his first character we really loved, we think of Stallone as Rocky for the same reason. So I have a feeling I'm always going to think of Millie Bobby Brown as 11 for that reason, even if she goes on to do many other great roles, which she potentially could. So at this point, 11 is basically a blank slate, who is mostly defined by her torturous life that she's been subject to in the Hawkins National Laboratory. Now, it's clear from the flashbacks that they want to make her some sort of specially bred, superpowered soldier or agent, okay? And the contrast between her curiosity as she explores the Wheeler home now and the despair and fear in her flashbacks, she's conveying it really well as an actress, as I said, non-verbally and all that, So let's finish this thing up. We're approaching 20 minutes. As I said, there's a lot of stuff in this episode, enough to decompress into a very long review. I didn't quite enjoy this episode as much as the first two, only because there were some parts of the subplots that personally I found kind of meh, But it's does not say the quality of the episode declined, just my interest in some of the future subplots. So this is I'm going to rate this as an 8.1 out of 10. I think of the other, just to give it a rating there. Comment down below if you have any questions for me or about this video. Please share your thoughts. Share this video if you enjoyed it. Like if you like. Dislike if you dislike. Subscribe if you want to hear more from me. My name is Matt. This has been Unbearable 73. Have a nice day, and I am out of here.